Hello, everyone. Pleased to have you with us. Today, as you may know, or if you don't know, as you will know in a moment, we're going to be talking about abortion. And we're going to be talking about it, first of all, because it's obviously very topical, but also because it is one of those subjects that Jews talk about, but that doesn't mean that they know a great deal about it, at least from the point of view of Jewish law. And so I thought it would be helpful to talk about what Judaism does say and doesn't say about abortion. And I want to begin with a couple of opening remarks about the nature of the exploration that we're going to be doing and the nature of the subject. First of all, how you vote and what Judaism says are not necessarily identical. And so this is not, I am not suggesting to any of you, although this is obviously entirely your choice, but I'm not suggesting to any of you that this is the way you have to vote, or you should vote, or you must vote, or you should wish, or judges you should appoint. But one of the things that bothers me sometimes is that people will, instead of exploring what Jewish sources say, they will assume that an opinion is Jewish because they hold it. And that, at least, we shouldn't do. That's intellectually dishonest. And so it is useful to learn what it is that the sources say and then to form your opinion, as opposed to form your opinion and then insist that must be what the tradition teaches because that's what you believe. The classic source that animates most of the discussion of abortion in Jewish sources and halachic sources and Jewish legal sources comes from the 21st chapter of Exodus. It reads as follows: if men strive together and hurt a woman with child, in other words, a pregnant woman, so that her fruit depart, in other words, so that the child becomes spontaneously aborted through the through being struck, and yet no harm follow, he shall surely be fined. According to the woman's husband shall lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if any harm follow, then he shall give life for life. Now, the Catholic Church interpreted that as any harm follow referring to the fetus. That is, if the fetus is considered a full human being, but that is not how Jewish sources saw it. Jewish sources understood this, and I think this is the pshat, the simple meaning of the text, as if the fetus is damaged, there is a monetary compensation. If the mother is killed, then that's considered a capital crime. There is a clear distinction here between the legal status of the fetus and the legal status of the mother. The question then, of course, becomes what is the legal status of the fetus? And there are lots of sources on that. Interestingly, the Noahide laws, the laws of the 7 sons of Noah, which are the Jewish laws that everyone is supposed to observe, right? Not everyone has to observe Shabbat, not everyone has to observe Kashrut, everyone has to observe thou shalt not murder. The Noahide laws say that, at least according to Rabbi Ishmael in the Talmud, a Noahide, that is a non-Jew who is subject to the Noahide laws, receives capital punishment even for destroying a fetus. What is the reason? He who sheds the blood of man, in man his blood will be shed. Therefore, according to Rabbi Ishmael here, it sounds like the fetus is a full human being. And therefore, with those openings, what you get then is a range of opinion throughout Jewish tradition about what a fetus is and what that means in terms of abortion. And I think it is fair to say, obviously there are more liberal and less liberal views of this, and I'm going to give you the range of views, both in classical sources and in modern sources in just a moment. But I want to start off by saying something fairly categorical that some of you will dislike, which is in Jewish law, okay? In Jewish law, there is no warrant for abortion on demand. Just isn't there. Now, you may still hold for abortion on demand, and many, many Jews do, but you can't find it in the traditional halachic sources, in the traditional Jewish source. It just doesn't exist. It is always considered a bad thing to some extent to end a life. Now, there are some sources that suggest that before the age of 40, the fetus is considered kamayim, like water. Not all the sources say that, but some do. And you could say that if you held by that source that before the 40th day, an abortion on demand could be justifiable. That's about the closest that you can come. But after that, there is no possibility in any of the sources for abortion on demand. However, having said that, the countervailing sources do exist against abortion being considered, as we see, equivalent to the life of the mother. So there is an opinion in the Talmud, for example, that if a pregnant woman is on death row, you are supposed to abort the fetus, eliminate the fetus before you kill the mother. Which in the Talmud's view is less cruel to the mother than actually killing her together with the fetus when she goes through capital punishment. That's the rationalization of it. And in fact, there has been a view so liberal, and this is about as liberal as you'll get in classical sources, that by Rabbi Jacob Emden, who was an eminent scholar of the 1700s, that the product of an affair, the fetus may be aborted, because otherwise the child will grow up as a mamzer, as a bastard. And this was obviously when an adulterous affair, obviously when that was a very severe legal category, much less so in our day, but this was hundreds of years ago. And therefore, he can do that. Others, of course, very strongly disagreed with that opinion and attacked it. And this goes back and forth. I want to say also on this same subject that there was a disagreement among renowned halachic authorities, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and the Tzitz Eliezer, there's Waldman, about whether a child who is diagnosed as a Tay-Sachs baby can be aborted. The Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said no, and Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg says yes. So obviously, this is one of the reasons, by the way, just also in terms of pure humanity, that every couple should get tested, genetically tested, before they have a child. However, you can see that there's a strong prejudice in the Jewish tradition to maintain the life of the fetus. And this is true with the exception, and this is an important exception, of the life of the mother. If the life of the mother is threatened because it is considered a full and realized life, then you can do anything you want in order to save it. I'll give you the example from Maimonides, from the Rambam. This too is a negative commandment, not to have compassion on the life of the pursuer, the rodef. Therefore, the sages rule that when a woman has difficulty to labor, one may dismember the embryo within her, either with drugs or surgery, because he is considered a pursuer seeking to kill her. Now that's pretty severe. That means, and he says, but once the head has emerged, in other words, once the baby crowns, he may not be harmed, because then it's considered an equal life. But 5 minutes before, the baby is born, if the life of the mother is threatened by it, the baby's life doesn't matter compared to the mother's. And so you can see that Judaism has a range of views on this. And the way that modern authorities then became more liberal in their approach was to say, what does the life of the mother mean here? And some modern authorities decided that the life of the mother could be seen more liberally than the literal life, and they saw it as the mental health of the mother, or something along those lines. And that, of course, is not a classical view, but it is a view that many moderns have defended, that when you talk about the life of the mother, the psychological health of the mother should be seen on a par, and there are sources that put one's disposition on a par with one's life in some senses. And so that's used to justify abortion as a resort to help, for example, a teen or somebody who was raped or product of incest, or victim of incest or something like that, in order to enable, because they say, well, the psychological damage may not be literally life-threatening, but it is virtually equivalent to being life-threatening, and is certainly threatening to their lives, to the way that they will live. And here it just depends on how willing you are to be elastic with the sources. But even there, you will notice that abortion as a means of birth control is not, you can't stretch that far in the Jewish tradition to permit abortion in such circumstances. So I hope that gives you at least a deeper sense. I have many other sources that I would be happy to quote to you, but I don't think that it will necessarily change the substance of what it is that we are that we're talking about here, which is that abortion is thought of not as murder. That is not a Jewish view, but as a sort of proto murder. It is the ending of a life, certainly after 40 days, if not before, and there it depends. But certainly after 40 days, it is considered that. And so you are not permitted to do it unless there is some kind of compelling rationale, but there are compelling rationales that would allow it. So I would say, so here is a source that gives you the rationale that I was just talking about. Mental health risk has been definitely equated to physical health risk. The woman who's in danger of losing her mental health, unless the pregnancy is interrupted, would therefore accordingly qualify. And that is that's quoted in 1 second. It's quoted in Rabbi Feldman's book, David Feldman's book, Marital Relations, Birth Control, and Abortion in Jewish Law. So that is, then it goes on to, for example, evidently there's room to permit when disgrace is involved, which may be called a matter of great need. And then that was the point of view of Rabbi Yosef Chaim ben Eliyahu. Some of the Sephardic deciders, poskim, people who decided the law, were more liberal than some of the Ashkenazim, which is actually a feature of modern Jewish law in general. He goes on to quote the chief rabbi Ben Zion Uziel, who also takes up the question of why abortion could be permitted in the case of great psychological distress. So there is a tour de horizon, a fairly, I think, representative, it's certainly not exhaustive, view of a subject that has been taken up by almost every significant rabbinic scholar who writes and teaches about law. And somebody who wants to take a Jewish view, I think, has to at least characterize abortion as not just a serious medical procedure, but also in Jewish law, something that does not exclusively concern a woman's right over her own body. The fetus is seen as a separate entity that has its own rights. Those rights are not absolute, but it has its own rights. And the way that you, again, the way that you react to this doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but the way that you react to this ought to be reacting to something which has knowledge of and familiarity with the way that Judaism teaches about this, as opposed to saying, my tradition must say this because it's what I believe. Now, I hope that I've given you enough that if you have any questions or comments about any of the things that we have discussed thus far, please put them either on the chat in YouTube, or if you want to, you can put them on the Facebook page, and I will be more than happy to respond to them as best I can. So please go right ahead if you have any questions. And because there is a lag, I don't know whether there will be any questions, because by the time you hear me ask you for questions, it's already a couple minutes later. Not a couple minutes, but whatever, 30 seconds, something like that. But let me know if you have any questions, because I think that gives you a fair account of the general view in the Jewish tradition. And what I'm going to try to do in this class is take issues like that is social issues that have some contention, and give you Jewish sources so that at least people can discuss them with a degree of intelligent expertise, not expertise, but intelligent familiarity with what the Jewish tradition says, as opposed to what it is that we assume the Jewish tradition says. And I'm going to give it one more minute, and then if there are no other questions, even though this has been a fairly short learning and lunch, I will sign off. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Marla asked, what about abortion considered when birth control utilized? I'm not sure from the phrasing of that what you're asking. If you're asking whether birth control is considered legitimate in Jewish law, by almost all authorities, though not all authorities, yes. If you're asking what about when abortion is used as a means of birth control, the answer is no. If you mean what about if you use birth control and you still have a child, that has no effect on the status of the child in Jewish law. The only thing that has an effect on the status of the child is the health of the mother, or in some cases, severe deformation in the child. That's also possible. But as I said, that's debatable. Does Jewish law address abortion when the mother is a minor? Well, first of all, I should say, remember that being a minor in Jewish law, women got married at 12, I mean, in ancient times. So what we would consider a minor was not considered a minor then. And before, if they were pregnant before marriage, then it was illicit sex. It was from, or after marriage, it could be adultery. Before marriage, it could be rape or incest. But it doesn't change the calculation, except in as much as it may change the view of the mental health of the mother. You could argue that it has such deleterious effects on a minor that it's warranted by the proviso of the health of the mother. But I mean, we forget that the reason that girls traditionally had their bat mitzvah at 12 and boys had their bar mitzvah at 13 was because people got married 12, 13, 14, 15 was not at all uncommon in ancient society. And not only in Jewish society, in almost all societies. Of course, they didn't live very long. So when the average lifespan is 30 or 40, it makes sense to get married at 14 or 15. And adolescence was unheard of. There were children having children. One of the things that struck me when I used to study, and then I ended up teaching medieval history, was the kings who were so violent. They were 17. I mean, we're not, we have this image of a king at age, 60 with a beard who has a lifetime of wisdom. That is not the way most kingdoms were ruled. People were very, very young back then. Okay, let's see. Hi from the Rhineland. Hello from the Rhineland. Good to see you. And yes, Marla says change the position. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe you could explain. What would the analysis be in case of rape or incest? As I said, it would depend entirely on how the evaluation of what that would do to the health of the mother. For classical sources, for many of them, it doesn't matter. But the perpetrator should be punished. But that alone doesn't warrant an abortion. But for more modern interpretations, where you see it as affecting, Emden probably would, because the child would be a mamzer. The child would not be the product of a legitimate union. He would probably permit it. So I don't want to say that no one would permit it. Some would, but for others, you would have to make your appeal on the basis of the health of the mother. And I think that in many non-literalist circles, let's put it that way. So we're talking modern Orthodox and to the left. I think that rape and incest would be seen as so severely damaging to the mother that the majority, maybe the overwhelming majority, I don't know, would say that that was a warranted case of abortion. But you'd have to ask the particular authority. I mean, one of the things that you find in this debate is that there's a lot of dishonesty on both sides in order to make a point. And I say that because there's dishonesty on the side of the people who say it's murder. Because if you really believed it was murder, honestly murder, right? If you thought that inside of a clinic they were gassing children, the reaction would be much, much more extreme than it is even now. So you understand that they perceive a distinction even if they say it's murder. And there's dishonesty on the side of the left by saying that it's nothing. That it's equivalent basically to the extraction of a tooth, that it's just a function of what a woman wants to do with her body because it's just a part of her body. And that also doesn't strike me as intellectually honest because it's not the same. If you look at an ultrasound, if you intend to have a baby and you're pleased to have a baby, then all of a sudden the ultrasound means something. So I think there's dishonesty on both sides. It's a serious social issue, and it's a painful one. And I don't know that there is a position you can take where the position on the other side doesn't have some sound, some important, and some weighty points. I think anybody who sees this as purely one-dimensional is not really giving credence and weight to the power of the other side of this very painful debate. So, Marla, it's like you're sending up smoke signals. I don't understand. Timing issue. Yes, change the position. Timing issue. I don't get what you're asking. I'm sorry. Can you give me a sentence, a full sentence with a subject and a verb and a preposition that would let me understand what you're asking? Because I don't get it. Anyway, I say all this again, not to make Somebody said, what about the life of the mother, including her well-being? Well, I think the entire class has discussed that. I'm not sure exactly what it is that you're asking. I don't know, Valerie, how to respond to that. I mean, what I've said all along, which is that classically the life of the mother takes precedence over the life of the baby, and then it depends how much you extend that. Maybe you came in late, but if you watch from the beginning, you'll hear a great deal about that. As I said, I think that the key here for us, the purpose for us of these sorts of classes and this exploration is so that people will understand what the Jewish tradition has to say about it and what the range of opinion is in the Jewish tradition. This is a particularly difficult and contentious issue, I know. We will take up some other difficult and contentious issues in the classes in the future, and we'll announce the topic as we did today right before the class. But for now, I hope that I managed to answer your questions. I tried my best, and I wish you all, whatever happens with this decision in the Supreme Court, I hope that you will all find a certain both sympathy for the side that is not your own, and also that, God willing, we will live in a society where the necessity for abortion will be felt increasingly rarely for all the good reasons that it should be, which is that people will have children when they want to and not be forced to, and that those children will grow up loved and cared for as they should be. And with that, thank you. I look forward to seeing you next time.